So yesterday, on our way to Seattle, something very harrowing happened to us. We were at the intersection getting ready to get on the freeway, right? And I want you to hear what happened.
Hello, this is Officer Pond, Federal Police Department. I understand you witnessed or possibly witnessed this collision on 320 to 95 Federal Way. If you can give me a call back, 253-349-1955. Thank you.
I will play it again. Anyway, that's the police officer calling me from Federal Way. Because as we were going to the freeway, someone ran a red light and was hit. And this car slammed into the light post. And the wheels kept moving. Now, what do you think we did? Yes, we did pray right away. In fact, that was the first thing we do. What else? Well, what would you do in that situation? You would try to help. That's good. That's good. I'm glad to know that you would try to help. And that is what we did. We immediately pulled over right in front of the car that was the most damaged. And I made sure that the person in there was okay. They didn't have any neck pain, numbness, weakness, or things like that. And I stayed there, asked their name, and are they okay, etc. And it was so beautiful to see that a nurse had stopped in addition to me. And I said, "Oh, are you a physician?" And she's like, No, I'm a nurse. And who are you? I'm an emergency physician. Okay, I'm leaving now. And I'm like, No, it's okay. You can keep assessing the patient. That's fine. So we stayed there until the first person to arrive was actually the public works guy for Federal Way. He works on the traffic lights. I don't know if there was like some alert. It's like traffic light inoperable or something like. I don't know what they get, if they get a text or whatever, but they slammed in that thing so hard, right, that it was like shaking the entire post. And so we stopped and we made sure from a medical standpoint people were okay. And I said, don't move, if your neck hurts or something like that, stay in here. But if you can get up and you don't have any pain, I'd get out of your car, because the car was smoking. It was smoking. And so he was able to get up and go around, but we stayed there until who arrived? The police and fire both arrived. And so that was the message that they left on our phone to give us a call if they were okay. We gave our card to the guy who was most injured, the person who hit him, and also the other lady that stayed there with us. So please pray for them. They got our little ministry card, which has the 2 trees on it. Show her that it's amazing that you would pick that. But that's what happened to us yesterday. Literally yesterday. And some people will say, well, we don't want, you've heard the saying, people say, don't bring a time of trouble upon yourself before prematurely, right? You've heard people say that. I'll give you an idea on how close we are. Yes, exactly. I'm going to let you fill in these blanks. You can look them up later. They're in the book Great Controversy. The dignitaries of church and state will unite to bribe, persuade, or compel all classes to do thus and thus. Have you seen any bribery or compulsion in the last few years? It is no part of Christ's mission to blank, right? It is Satan and men actuated by his Spirit that seek to do this. And I'll fill it in at the end, don't worry. Just think about it. There is no more conclusive evidence that we possess the spirit of Satan than the disposition to blank, 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 those who do not appreciate our work or who act contrary to our ideas. So think about these little statements, and we'll fill them in a moment. 2 years ago, I dropped an invitation to speak for camp meeting in England, and I flew into Warsaw, Poland. It was the first week of March, about 2 years ago. My best man at my wedding knew I was headed there. He was in Loma Linda. He said, "Tell me whatever you need." He got a bunch of sleeping bags. Apparently, that's what was needed in this location. I took 3 70-pound bags, those black duffel bags where I'm taking, in addition to my carry-on, and even Mom joined in. She gave me a brand new laptop bag. Can anyone guess where I was going? First week of March, about 3 years ago. Where was I going? Yes. I couldn't fly into Ukraine, but many of the refugees were going to Warsaw. This is our team, Gideon Rescue Company. Has anyone heard of Gideon Rescue Company? David back there, a couple people. And we went, and the first thing they wanted to do for us was feed us, of course, right? And it was amazing. We met a guy who was actually Muslim and said, "Why did you come here to Poland?" I said, "I'm here to see as many of the refugees that are coming from that country as possible." But let's think about the question. What I like about being an emergency physician is that when people are going to die, they don't cry out to natural selection or evolution or Buddha or even other Hindu gods or things like that, Krishna. They call out to God, the creator of the universe. As a Seventh-day Adventist, what is the mark of the beast of Revelation? It is a Sunday law. It is a forced worship. And how you can know that very simply is it's in opposition to the seal of God, right? So you look at what the seal of God is, right? The author of the seal, the information is the author, the dominion, and the authority, right? Have you ever seen the seal of the state of California, right? It's got the dominion, state of California. I think it's Governor Newsom right now. And then it will say the authority, and it'll have their seal. And what of God's commandments or anywhere in the Bible has the seal? The fourth commandment. In fact, you don't even know who wrote the commandments until you get the fourth. Do you realize that? It could be any God, but it's the God who created the heavens and the earth, the springs of water, right? In Deuteronomy it says the God who brought you out of Egypt with a mighty hand. So it identifies who it is. And that's the controversy. We were talking about the Sabbath recently. And if anyone been to Europe? Anyone been to Europe? What day of the week does the calendar start on in Europe? Monday. And I was reasoning with this person who had listened to a presentation I gave, and they said, yes, you're talking about Sabado, Sobota, Shabbat, all these root words. I was looking at linguistics for the Sabbath, and they said, but we know in Europe you're wrong. This person was German, so they kind of shared a little heritage with me as I'm half German. And I said, oh, the German language, perfect. They said, that's not true. I know you're going to try to go to Norwegian where it's Lord's dog, but that's not what it means. And I said, German's perfect. No. And he said, Montag. And he started listing the days of the week. It doesn't say there anyway. The seventh day is nothing like Sabbath. I said, I'm not going to go to the seventh day of the week. What's Wednesday? He's like, what? What's Wednesday? Mittwoch. And I said, what does Mittwoch literally mean? And he stepped away. He stopped the conversation, just walked away, because he knew what the answer was. You can't say Monday, Tuesday, middle, right? Yeah, because you got it lopsided now. You got to go Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, middle, Thursday, Friday, Sabbath. I said, German's perfect for the Sabbath. He was not as enthused. But how do you know what is the definition in the Bible of what is contrary to God. What is the definition of sin? 1 John 3:4. Who can say it by heart? Whosoever sinneth, transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. But do you know there's two other definitions? Romans 14:23 says, whatsoever is not of faith, it is sin. Romans 4:17. James 4:17, excuse me, not Romans. It was Romans 14:10. James 4:17, to him who knows to do good, but doeth it not, to him it is. But you know, before I became a Seventh-day Adventist, I studied with a lot of different people groups, and I would always ask them this one question. I would say, do you think you're the only ones that are saved? I'm serious. That was my first question that I would always ask people. And many of those churches said, well, we do have the truth. And I'm like, that just seems so crazy to me. How is that possible? What about somebody who never had a chance? What about somebody in Africa or Zimbabwe or the Middle East or North Korea or anywhere that never had a chance to hear the truth? What if you don't know? How can God judge me if I never had a chance to know? If I never had an opportunity? Without cheating, I want you to fill in the blank in your mind. And I know you're going to be tempted to say something. I know you know the answer already, Dr. Chan, but resist. Thus Christ pictured to his disciples the scene of the what? Great judgment day. And he represented its decision as turning on how many points? The 28 fundamentals. That's just one. That's pretty simple. Wouldn't that be simple? They say, limit your talk to 3 points. Have you heard that? This is 1 point. That's it. 1 point. When the nations are gathered before him, there will be how many classes? 2 classes. It's not C. There's no C option. Right? And their eternal destiny will be determined by, fill in the blank, Christ's rule of life, by which every one of us, how many? Every one of us must stand or fall in the judgment is when we something, then for us Christ's mission is accomplished. We are fitted for heaven. So we're talking about developing character. We're talking about the judgment. We're talking about character. We're talking about the Sabbath, the mark of the beast, all these things. This seems like a lot of different things. How is it possible? Can it be just one? The line at the Ukrainian border was several days long. Did you know that? To cross into Poland. And there were people who ran out of gas waiting in line. There were 2 young women who got out of their car and marched through the snow and made it to the border. We welcomed them, actually at the church where I was staying. One of them was a professional singer, and she said, thank you for taking us in. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for being a doctor to come here. What can I sing for you? I said, we're just glad you made it. And it was by God's amazing grace. So she sang us with her sister. She sang us Amazing Grace. But it's easy to be nice to some wonderful singers. Obviously, my wife is one of them, right? But what about the person who isn't as pleasant? I remember one time I was in residency at San Francisco General. And I'm telling you, in San Francisco alone, there's over 50,000 homeless. Did you know that? That's like an entire city. And one nurse finally just lost it. She said, sir, your feet stink. They stink. You need to wash them. This is like as Dr. Esther, this is like cut into an abscess kind of stink. That's serious. Or as those of you who are officials, this is anaerobe sort of stink. And she just threw down her instruments and she just walked out of the room. And I'm like, I don't know. I remember someone said to me, and they said, most homeless people are something AZY. Do you know what most people would say? But that's not true. The real word is crazy. Did you know that? Over half of the homeless population has a psychiatric diagnosis. Were you aware of that? When they're walking down the street, talking to themselves, they're hearing a voice. They're actually hearing a voice. And I remember one time meeting a homeless patient. I looked at his name and I said, wait a minute, are you related to such and such, the photographer? He's like, that is me. And I said, what happened to you? He's like, I was at the top of my game. I was the #1 photographer in the city. But I was away from my family. And all of a sudden, my wife left me. I began to drink. And my work suffered. I lost contract after contract after contract. I was living in my car. Then I was living on the streets. And that's why I'm here with you today. Sometimes people have a story that's behind it. I can tell you, I met another man that many people thought was homeless. He actually wasn't homeless. He was a gentleman who had fallen down and hit his head from being intoxicated. And it turned out that he was the owner of one of the largest bars in San Francisco. And for some reason, he just took a liking to me. And we ended up, he's like, well, I'm at such and such place. Come down. You don't have to have a drink. You can just come eat some stuff. We got some vegan stuff too. And so I went there and we started becoming friends. And did you know he stopped drinking? It was amazing. People can change. Have you ever heard the saying, the power of one? Have you heard that saying? The power of one, like you can make a difference sort of thing? Has anyone ever said a word to you that encouraged you? I actually saw a post by Maribel this last week, and it was so encouraging. And she encouraged you to try, right? You may think that it's impossible, but try. Just one word. The word try. It only has 3 letters, right? Try. I want you to see the power of one word and what you can do with that. Christ has linked his interests with that of humanity, and he asks us to become one with him for the saving of humanity. Freely you have received, freely give, Matthew 10:8. Sin is the greatest of all evils. What's the greatest evil? It's not ignorance. It's not hunger. It's not war. It's not any of those things. It is sin. Do you realize that? Because that is why we have all those other things. Sin is the greatest of all evils and is ours to pity and help the sinner. There are many who err and feel their shame and their folly. They are hungry for words of encouragement. They look upon their mistakes and errors until they are driven almost to desperation. These souls we are not to neglect. If we are Christians, we will not pass by on the other side, keeping as far as possible from the very ones who most need our help. When we see human beings in distress, whether through affliction or through sin. I remember one time I was talking to a colleague in the ER, and he was like, all these people are here because of their own stupidity. Just do the Darwin method. Let them eliminate themselves. He was like kind of giving me a hard time. I think I had prescribed some medications. And he's like, prescribe some more. Maybe they could overdose on it. And I'm like, man, really cynical. But the thing is, it doesn't matter if it's through sin or affliction. We should never say, this does not concern me. You that are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of meekness. By faith and prayer, press back the power of the enemy. Speak words of faith and courage that will be as a healing balm to the bruised and wounded one. Many have fainted and become discouraged in the great battle of life. When how many words? One word of kindly cheer would have strengthened them to overcome. Can you make a difference? Yes, if even one word. And those of you in positions of trust, you may be a lawyer like Monica Kim. You may be a physician like Chan. You may be a pastor like Pastor Duarte. You may be in a position of trust and power, and you say that one word of encouragement and hope, and it gives that person the motivation. Never should we pass by one suffering soul without seeking to impart to him the comfort wherewith we are comforted of God. What was great is that the churches opened up wide. We took up shop at the church closest to the border of the Ukraine. Several of our church members actually worked with the conference there to bring as much literature as possible over the border. And of course it was fun because every morning I would wake up and there'd be new friends to meet. We could actually have breakfast together, etc. Or when we would work with our translators, we met this young man who just wanted to know what we were doing in the scrub, so we told him. One of the things that really kind of impacted me is because I had to do this trip during when I had pledged to do camp meeting in England. And England, I said, listen, will you let me go so I can help? They said, yes, but you must preach the sermon on Sabbath. So I'm figuring out flights from Warsaw to England and back, right? So I'm trying to go on Friday, because I don't want to travel on the Sabbath, and then speak Friday night, Sabbath, and then go back Saturday after sunset. But it allowed me to see what was going on in the airports and the bus stations. It was so crowded. It was crazy. And in the train station in Kiev, it was nuts. Everybody was given water. We gave them food, whatever. But they were more interested in the tracts. Did you know that? They were more interested in the steps to Christ that had just been translated, fresh translation into Ukrainian by Robert Kuchek. Do you guys remember meeting Robert, my friend? He gave us 40,000 steps to Christ. Unbelievable. And that was because of you guys. You guys supported that work. That was huge. This guy was actually kicked out of medical school for a conscientious stand that he made. And he said, you know what? This has encouraged me more than being kicked out of medical school. They eventually took him back, but it was a very tough time for him. So he was with us because he was on vacation, on possible permanent vacation from med school. There was one time in residency, and only one, when I defied one of my professors. Obviously they're your teacher. You're supposed to do and kind of what they say. But I remember we were in a busy afternoon. Ambulance after ambulance was coming. And for some reason, we had 4 in a row where the patient was over 500 pounds. The one I was going to see was over 800 pounds. And I could hear these things saying, one of the nurses would say, why do they send us all these beached whales? Who's going to take the big boy in room 3? And I looked at my professor when he said that. And I said, if that man was your brother, would you talk to him like that? Excuse me, Father Tim, why don't you just go see the patient? I said, I will see the patient. I came in to see a man who was over 800 pounds. The medics actually had to break into his home to get him out. A special gurney had to be used to bring him there. And I was concerned about a possibility of a medical condition. I was concerned about ruling out appendicitis. And I thought to myself, well, let me call ultrasound. And she said, if this is room 3, the answer is no. My probe will not penetrate a foot of fat. Thank you. I called the CT tech, and he said, if this is room 3, the answer is no. He cannot fit through the donut. I said, let's use the open one. My weight limit on my gurney is 550 pounds. Will you want to break the machine? The answer is no. My next call was the neighborhood zoo. And I said, hey, can you, what's your weight limit on your CT? Well, what you got? 800. Oh, lightweight. No problem. Yeah, we could do the CT. That's no problem. What do you want? I said, I want to rule out epi. And they said, oh, that's perfect. No problem. Do you need contrast? Yeah, preferably. And then they call back out and said, is this a human being? We talked to legal, And I don't think we can do that. We have to go through a process of sterilizing the scanner, etc. So the answer is no. Do you think this gentleman knows he has a problem? Do you think he knows that his weight is a problem? I'm calling the zoo to transfer the guy. He knows, right? Sometimes what people need most is not the sermon, but they need the sermon through you. One of my friends went to a lifestyle program, and he was the food service director for one of our Adventist hospitals. And he came to learn about this lifestyle. And he wanted to try to not only bring it back because he was the food service director, but he wanted it for himself. And in 19 days, he was off his blood pressure medications, off his diabetes medication. His cholesterol was normal with no medications. And he came back and he made sweeping changes. He made the entire cafeteria plant-based, like overnight. I don't know how he did it. It was unbelievable. And the thing is that people continued to kind of make these little jokes. And they would say, hey, wait a minute. Hey, how was your trip? Are you still keeping the weight off? Don't do too much quality control. You know, tasting the recipes sort of thing. And he would kind of laugh. But I would see him cry at home. Did you know that? When he'd come home from work. Because I stayed with him. And I got up with this guy at 5 a.m. every morning. And we would walk like 5 miles before work. And I remember one time he tripped over something because we'd carry flashlights because it was dark. And I heard this snap that I knew was his bone. He's like, no, I can make it. I said, please, just relax. I'm going to call an ambulance. He had broken both the bones of his leg. But most people didn't realize that he had been trying and desperately wanting to be better and healthier. When I arrived in Warsaw, this was the hospital that I worked at. It was a shipping crate. And what I did is I tried to not only direct and help medically, but give people natural remedies. I showed people how to do trigger point. Because some of the patients we saw, they had horrible headaches, but you could look at them and they were like this. But I would be too if I was running for my life, right, and fleeing my homeland. But I always got a chance to pray with them. I tried to point them to God in every encounter that we had. One of the things that was funny is that sometimes in the midst of the emergencies, we had a child that came in that just was constipated. And so I can't remember what we did. We may have done an enema or a glycerin suppository. But she was so open and so grateful. She let us pray with her. She wanted all of our literature. It was unbelievable. One of the things that impressed me in the train station when I was there is that everybody was from different countries, and they had on their back every language that they could speak fluently. And there were people from Russia there. Did you know that? Doesn't that blow your mind? It's unbelievable. One time when I was in residency, there was a woman who I thought initially was a trauma. Oh, this lady, there was a sexual assault in room 5, and all the people were running into the room, and they were going to order this and that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't even seen the patient. And suddenly, when they asked her a question, everybody left the room. And they said, ma'am, what happened? Are you hurt? She's like, I think I'm okay, but I'm concerned. Well, where did it happen? I was at work. You were at work. Where were you at work? At 3rd and Main. And all the sympathy drained out of that room. Because this woman, her job was the oldest job in the world, so to speak. She was selling her body for money. But when I started talking to her, I found out that she had 3 children at home. Her husband had left her, and this was the only way she could make enough money to take care of her kids and also put herself through school. She was raped by a client selling her body. But sometimes we don't know their stories. And I said, next time you may be killed. There are other ways. She's like, I don't know other ways. And I tried to get her to talk to our social worker who came back in the room. So that was good. One of the things I loved about the crisis was seeing the resilience of people. We all ate together. We all stayed in the basement of the church together before we went out to our different jobs. Many of them were translators. I was, of course, doing the medical. A lot of the people volunteered in the cities. They had their practice during the day, and they tried to volunteer at night. But I was the only attending on during certain times of the night. So I was very thankful to help. The medical students and residents were very enthusiastic, but they needed some direction. When I was coming back from England after I had done the camp meeting on Sabbath, I asked them, I said, what do you guys need? And I had given a bunch of sleeping bags and a bunch of stuff. And you know what everybody wanted? Is they wanted portable battery packs. Isn't that funny? And the reason why is people were on the run and they wanted to be able to stay in contact with their family, and they could only plug in. You know, when they'd come to a train station, every outlet would be filled. And people would have a sleeping bag by the power so they could keep their devices going. So I brought a friend of mine. We came to this store after sunset on Saturday before I flew back to Warsaw. And I said, do you guys have any portable battery packs? They said, oh, they're in aisle 4. I said, I want every battery pack you have. And you're actually not allowed to bring so many in your luggage because of the whole lithium. Do you have any lithium? You know how they always ask you that? They made an exception and let me fill the entire suitcase, will of them. They knew what I was doing. I had thousands of dollars of worth of battery packs. It was like a brick of battery packs. And I gave one to every single person. If they were alone, they got a small one. If they were a family, they got a big one. And they were so overjoyed. It doesn't take much to make a difference. Some of the people came and they had just fled their homeland and they were so stressed. That is not a normal blood pressure, I'm telling you. But I shared in their stress because this was during the pandemic. Do you realize? 3 years ago was still the pandemic. I don't know how many swabs I got shoved up my nose at that time, but I think eventually they pulled like some gray matter out of there. Or one of the swabs. So the medical students were always having to swab me because I needed a test to go this direction. I needed a test to go the other direction. But I found that even though I couldn't speak much Polish, the secret to unity is we were there for one purpose. And that was to help as many of the refugees as we could. Have you figured out the question yet? Let's go to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25, verses 34 to 40. And as the scene opens, the God of the universe has gathered before him all nations. And we are facing the great judgment day. Then shall the king say to them on his right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Why? For I was hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. And the king shall answer and say to them, verily, verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it to who? One of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. Here's the quote from before. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And before him shall be gathered, how many of us? All nations. And he shall separate them one from another. Thus Christ on the Mount of Olives pictured to his disciples the scene of the great judgment day, and he represented its decision as turning on how many points? 1 point. How can God judge on just 1 point? Here's how. When the nations are gathered before him, there will be but 2 classes, and their eternal destiny will be determined by what they have done or have neglected to do for him in the person of the poor and suffering. It's that simple. I had a friend of mine from Loma Linda. She pulled me aside. She said, listen, I know you mentioned to some people, because I was talking to a student group there. I know you mentioned to some people that you're flying to help out in Ukraine. Is that true? I'm like, yes. She's like, you know they just declared war last week, right? This is a little early. She's like, why don't you wait a little while till it's a little bit more stable? I said, when it's stable, they won't need you or I, because it will be stable. When that person in the accident has been stabilized by the medics, they wouldn't need me to make sure they didn't have a broken neck or whatever, right? They won't need you at that time. But now is the time, in these final moments of Earth's history, to make a difference. In the trauma world, we have something called the golden hour. Some of you are surgeons and you understand that concept. The golden hour is that little window of time. There are some traumatic accidents where the people are killed instantly, or they have like injuries that they're not going to survive the trip to the hospital, like they tore their aorta or something like that. But there's other injuries where you have about an hour to make a difference. Now is the golden hour, spiritually, for our world. This is the time between life and death for so many people. And I'm telling you right now, it's not complicated. You don't have to be a doctor, a lawyer, a pastor. You can just say one word, right? Remember? One word of cheer. You can help people at the clinics that we do, right? The free clinics. I know you guys have done many of those. That's fantastic. It's yes, April 6th, praise the Lord. I will be gone, unfortunately, but yes, that's great. Christ's rule of life, by which how many of us? Every one of us must stand or fall in the judgment, is whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. What's another name for that? The golden rule. If you're atheist, Buddhist, Hindu, Shinto, Muslim, it doesn't matter. Can you understand the golden rule? If you're 5, can you understand the golden rule? Yes. I have 1 dolly, and I have 2 dollies, and you have no dollies. I'll share my dolly with... Right? Remember that song? That you guys teaching those kids, that's the gospel. You are making a difference. You are giving those kids the ability to see that they can give rather than be selfish, that they can resist their own natures and make people happy. That's beautiful. So here's why God can judge this way. Those who Christ commends in the judgment may have known little of theology, but they have cherished His principles. Through the influence of the divine Spirit, they've been a blessing to those around them. Even among the who? The heathen are those who have cherished the spirit of kindness. Right? It's not always what you say, but it's how you say it sometimes to somebody. The spirit of kindness. Before the word of life had fallen upon their ears, they have befriended the missionaries, even ministering to them at the peril of their own lives. You know, the nicest letters I've ever gotten as a physician is when the patient died. You'd think I'd be sued or whatever. That's actually when I get the nicest letters. Because I'll say, I know that you guys are very devout Catholics. Would you like me to call the priest to pray? And they would say, no, he's not available. Could you do the last rites, Dr. Riesenberger? And obviously, we have a little difference there, but you don't bring up the controversial thing. So I've prayed with the family. I've prayed for them in the hour of grief, and they are so thankful. They're so grateful. Even though you'd think it's like the worst time, right? It's kindness. They have befriended the missionaries, even ministering to them at the peril of their own lives. Among the heathen are those who worship God how? Ignorantly. Those to whom the light is never brought by human instrumentality, yet they will not perish. Though ignorant of the written law of God, they have heard His voice speaking to them in nature and have done the things that the law required. And their works are evidence that the Holy Spirit has touched their hearts, and they are recognized as who? Children of God. And you might ask and say, well, what can I do? This is how easy it is. Place yourself in that person's position and ask yourself, what would I want? One of the reasons why I talked to the Todorico and the Poyarkov family. By the way, thank you all for helping them. I've still got some stuff that I'm helping them out with, but they're doing a lot better. But they're very worried right now that they're all going to get sent back. So please pray for them. But if I were in a place and I changed places with somebody, what would I want them to do? I wanted to do more than just come for 2 or 3 weeks and help out. So they were actually my translators. Angelina and her sister Rosina were my translators. I said, if you guys and your families can get the asylum visa, you can stay. All 8 of them got their asylum visas. We had 10 of us in my home at one point. It was like, there was a GOIC called Higher Than the Highest. Our house was tighter than the tightest. It's true. That's what it was like. And I was married to Ashley. God bless you, Ashley, for going through that. Were our condition and theirs reversed, what would we desire them to do for us? All this, so far as lies in our power, we are under the most solemn obligation to do for them. The Savior has given His precious life in order to establish a church capable of caring for sorrowful, tempted souls. A company of believers may be poor, uneducated, unknown. What are they? Uneducated, unknown. Well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a doctor. But you could be poor, uneducated, and unknown. But you can make a difference. You can make a difference. In Christ, they will do a work in the home. Where's our first mission field? In the home. I was just talking to Monica. I said, I looked up the trial of Job or the perseverance of Job, and your picture was there. It's true. I mean, you have all these things that happen all at once. She was kind of telling me what was happening with Charlotte, and this, and we both had surgery. I'm like, wow. You're always so happy, though, despite that. Praise the Lord. But that is a ministry right there in your home. The neighborhood. Tell everyone what one of our neighbors just said to you. Was it yesterday, actually? It was just yesterday. Tell them what they want to do for us now.
The next time you're here for a weekend, we all need to hang out.
What do they want to bring over? What do they want to bring over? They want to bring over Korean barbecue. You guys got to help me make a vegan bulgogi, okay? Yeah, there you go. So it's just, that's what you can do in your neighborhood. Did you know that Ellen White says you should not only know all your neighbors, but know their spiritual condition? I'm ashamed to know. I'm still learning. I don't even know I think the one with the food truck, I don't think I know them very well. So I'm learning this myself. In the neighborhood, in the church, and even the regions beyond, whose results shall be as far-reaching as eternity. Not everyone is going to deal with somebody with a heart rate of 170, right? I'm going to deal with that. That's what I was trained to do, right? You're a pastor. You're going to minister to someone who's grieving. You're a lawyer. You're going to help someone find a way to actually make it in their marriage or make it in citizenship. You're a physician. You're going to make sure that person survives. You're going to take out that ectopic pregnancy. You're going to get that stroke patient to walk again, right? We all do different things. But God has given you at least one talent. Did you know that? God has said that every one of us has a gift, and we can use that gift to His glory and honor. And a lot of people will say, yeah, but this is a tragedy. This is horrible. How can you say that God works through this? I want you to know, I went somewhere for a weekend speaking, and I got like an almost third-degree burn on my arm. It was like probably secondary. It was more blistering. And the funny thing is because I got that blister, someone said, oh, let me call my sister who's a nurse. She hadn't been to church for like 5 years. It was perfect. And when they actually heard the sermon and kind of looked at my wound and the burn and stuff like that, they were very encouraged because they came to church. And this was a letter that one of them wrote to me. I was more positive in autumn. After I got sick, I had low energy in December. It was a little hard for me to stay motivated, but I have plans to get into a better routine in everyday life and find what motivates me. I was happy that my sister came to the youth weekend too. This was the nurse that hadn't been there for a while. And I think it is going to be very good with her. I'm very glad that I came. It was a blessing. Please send the picture of the burn in a week or two so I can see that it's healed. She was wanting to help me. Thank you for your prayers. I'll pray for you too. and your warm energy will be missed. What's interesting is they wrote to me later, thanks for the inspiration to trust God more and learn more. When I was little, I also wanted to preach and tell about God in such a credible, inspiring ways you do. I send greetings back. And then I got this message from their mother. And she said, my 2 daughters will be baptized this Sabbath. And that was a huge joy. And I wanted to share kind of as a closing thought. When I was in Japan during the tsunami, just seeing the devastation, helping out with people medically, I remember we went to a top of a hill. And on the top of a hill, there's a large monument. And the monument had been damaged to one side. And on all 4 sides of the monument were written in 4 different languages, "May peace prevail on earth." But how will peace prevail on earth? This is the answer. Love to man is the earthward manifestation of the love of God. It was to implant this love, to make us children of one family, that the King of glory became one with us. And when his parting words are fulfilled, love one another as I have loved you. When we love what? The world as he has loved us, then for us, his mission is accomplished. We are fitted for heaven, for we have heaven in our hearts. You know what the best way to guarantee that you will be saved is? Is to save other people. It's that simple. That's my appeal for this time in Earth's history. How do you prepare for the judgment? God is only going to ask you this: how did you help the people around you? And the people around you might be your kids, right? There might be family members that are away from the Lord that you have to pray and fast for and bring back. It might be the Sabbath school that you're teaching about Genesis. It might be your neighbor who, like, you bring an apple pie to. It may be a relative that you haven't talked to in years, where there's that distance. I had a colleague who was a physician. He came to me and he said, I have not talked to my brother in over 10 years. I said, why did you guys have a split? He's like, I don't even remember now. And I said, well, tell me about him. He's like, well, how far away is he? He's like, he's down the street. He's in the same town. And I said, well, tell me about him. What does he do? Well, he's like this, and he's an accountant. I said, well, what does he like? He loves dessert. I said, okay, what's his favorite dessert? Oh, my wife, she makes this dessert, and he loves it. And I said, listen, have you tried calling him? He never picks up. He never returns the call. And I said, just go over to his house, knock on the door, bring his favorite dessert. And he said that he did that one time. He said, hey, my wife made a bunch of extra this. We just figured we'd drop off some. And he said, hey, you want to come in and have a bite? And that little apple cobbler restored their relationship. It's not always the big things. It's sometimes the small things. But to do to the others what you would want them to do for you. Can you think of someone in your life, in the home, in the neighborhood, in the church even, that is away from God? Can you think of someone who maybe needs to be closer to God in your circle? Can you think of a few people? Would you like to say, God, use me today so that we can both face the judgment in peace? If that's your decision, please stand with me as we pray.